May 1st, 1915. A luxury ocean liner prepares to depart New York Harbor. Nearly 2,000 passengers board the RMS Lusitania. Businessmen, families, children, tourists, Americans. But sitting beside the ship's advertisement in several American newspapers was something chilling. A warning. A public warning from the Imperial German Embassy. It told Americans that the waters around Britain were now a war zone, and that passengers sailing on British ships did so at their own risk. 1 week later, the Lusitania was torpedoed by a German U-boat. Nearly 1,200 people died, and for more than a century, historians and conspiracy theorists have argued over one haunting question. Was the Lusitania simply a civilian passenger ship, or had it become part of the war itself? And another question: did the British government knowingly place the ship in danger? Tonight, we explore the warning ads, the hidden cargo, Winston Churchill, and the sinking that helped change the course of the First World War. Europe descends into war. To understand the Lusitania, we need to step into Europe in 1915. The First World War had exploded across the continent. Germany was trapped in a brutal two-front war. Britain controlled the seas, and the British naval blockade was slowly strangling Germany's economy. Food shortages spread. Raw materials became scarce. German civilians were suffering. Germany's answer was the submarine, the U-boat, a weapon that terrified the British Empire because it could strike invisibly beneath the waves. But submarines created a major legal and moral problem. Traditional naval warfare required warships to stop civilian vessels, inspect them, and allow civilians to evacuate before sinking the ship. But submarines were fragile. If a U-boat surfaced to warn a merchant vessel, it could itself be rammed or attacked. Germany increasingly moved toward what became known as unrestricted submarine warfare, and Britain accused Germany of barbarism. Germany accused Britain of hypocrisy, because Britain was also using civilian ships for wartime logistics, and that accusation would become central to the story of the Lusitania. The warning advertisement on May 1st, 1915, as the Lusitania prepared to leave New York, the German embassy in Washington took an extraordinary step. It purchased newspaper advertisements warning Americans not to sail aboard British ships. The warning stated, "Travelers intending to embark on the Atlantic voyage are reminded that a state of war exists between Germany and her allies, and Great Britain and her allies." It continued, "Vessels flying the flag of Great Britain are liable to destruction in those waters." And finally, travelers sailing in the war zone on ships of Great Britain or her allies do so at their own risk. Think about that. This was not a secret warning. It was public, printed openly in American newspapers. In some cases, the warning appeared directly beside advertisements for the Lusitania itself, but most Americans ignored it. Many believed Germany was bluffing. Others believed no civilized nation would sink a passenger liner filled with civilians, and the Lusitania itself had a reputation for speed. Many believed it could outrun any submarine. That confidence would prove fatal. Was the Lusitania carrying military cargo? This is where the story becomes deeply controversial. For decades after the sinking, Britain insisted the Lusitania was simply an innocent civilian vessel. Germany insisted otherwise, and modern historical research has largely confirmed that Germany was not entirely wrong. The Lusitania was carrying military-related cargo. The cargo included millions of rounds of rifle ammunition, shell casings, fuses, and other materials considered contraband during wartime. Now, this is important. The ship was not a battleship. It was not transporting artillery divisions or soldiers into combat, but it also was not entirely civilian, and Britain had officially listed the Lusitania as an auxiliary cruiser. In other words, a civilian liner that could potentially be converted for military use. Germany argued this made the ship a legitimate target. Britain argued the cargo was minor and that civilian passengers should never have been endangered. This legal and moral grey zone still divides historians today. Was Germany justified in attacking a ship carrying contraband? Or did the presence of civilians override everything else? That debate has never truly ended. The Torpedo. On May 7, 1915, off the southern coast of Ireland, German submarine U-20 spotted the Lusitania. The submarine's commander, Captain Walter Schwieger, later recorded the event in his war diary. At approximately 2:10 p.m., the U-boat fired a torpedo. It struck the Lusitania on the starboard side. Passengers described panic, smoke, steam, screaming, chaos. Then something strange happened. Many survivors reported hearing a second explosion. To this day, historians debate what caused it. Some believe it was a boiler explosion. Others argue it may have involved hidden cargo. The ship sank in just 18 minutes. Nearly 1,200 people died, including 128 Americans. The images shocked the world. Newspapers portrayed Germany as monstrous. The sinking became one of the greatest propaganda disasters of the First World War. And while the United States did not immediately enter the war, public opinion began shifting dramatically. Germany had won a tactical victory, but perhaps a strategic catastrophe. Churchill and the conspiracy theory. Now we arrive at the most controversial part of the story. Winston Churchill. At the time, Churchill served as First Lord of the Admiralty, and critics have long argued that elements within the British government may have knowingly exposed the Lusitania to danger. Why? Because Britain desperately wanted the United States to move closer to entering the war. One Churchill memorandum from February 1915 included the following line: "It is most important to attract neutral shipping to our shores in the hope especially of embroiling the United States with Germany." That quote is real, and conspiracy theories grew around it. Some researchers argue British intelligence knew German submarines were operating nearby. The Lusitania received inadequate escort protection. The ship reduced speed near Ireland, and the Admiralty may have allowed the disaster to happen. Some even claim Churchill deliberately orchestrated the sinking, but here we must be careful. There is no surviving document proving Churchill ordered the ship into danger. There is no verified order telling the captain to slow down in the U-boat zone, and most mainstream historians reject the idea of a deliberate sacrifice. What they do acknowledge is something else: negligence, overconfidence, poor coordination, and wartime opportunism. The British Admiralty knew submarines were active, yet the ship sailed. The Lusitania carried civilians, yet it also carried contraband. And once the ship sank, Britain absolutely used the disaster for propaganda purposes. That much is undeniable. The larger question, the Lusitania forces us to confront a disturbing reality about modern war. Where exactly is the line between civilian and military infrastructure? When governments use civilian systems for wartime logistics, do those systems become targets? And when civilians are placed inside those systems, who bears responsibility? Germany blamed Britain. Britain blamed Germany. And ordinary civilians drowned between competing empires. That pattern would repeat again and again throughout the 20th century. The Lusitania was not just a tragedy. It was an early warning about total war, a world where civilians commerce, propaganda, transportation, and military strategy all become intertwined. And once that line disappears, everyone becomes vulnerable. More than a century later, the sinking of the Lusitania still provokes fierce debate. Germany warned Americans publicly. The ship carried military-related cargo. Britain knew submarines were active, and yet civilians boarded the vessel, believing they were safe. The result was catastrophe. Perhaps the most unsettling aspect of the story is not the torpedo itself, but the realization that powerful nations were already beginning to blur the boundaries between civilian life and total war. And once those boundaries disappear, truth itself becomes another casualty. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, subscribe, share the podcast, and leave a review. And let me know in the comments. Do you believe the sinking of the Lusitania was simply wartime tragedy, or something far more calculated?